Hey, welcome to Accidental Gods, to the podcast where we believe that another world is still possible and that together we can make it happen. I'm Manda Scott, and I spent the first series of this podcast laying out the basic toolkit that we think is essential to making conscious evolution a possibility, which is the entire premise behind the Accidental Gods project. This podcast, the website, and the membership program that arises from it. We spent the second series finding people who are using these tools in ways that could inspire us to change, so that if we want to go on this path, we had an idea of what was possible. And that still obtains in the third season. We are still looking at the people walking this path. But on top of that, I want to begin to lay out a vision for the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible. If we can feel forward to where we need to go, if we can build for ourselves a felt sense of how it might be, we stand a better chance of getting there. With that in mind, my guest this week is a remarkable woman of astonishing creativity, talent, and unmatched connectedness to the land. Carolyn Hillyer lives on a 1,000-year-old farm in the heart of Dartmoor in Devon, where she and her partner, the musician Nigel Shaw, have created a sanctuary, a genuinely sacred place that feels to me like nowhere else I have ever been on earth. There is such a powerful sense of the sacred there, and of a deep, deep connection to the land and to the ancestors who walked the land. There's a sense of tribe, of connectedness to the potential of who we could be. As you'll hear, Carolyn is an artist and musician, and I really encourage you to head for her website at Seventh Wave Music to listen to the beauty of her music and her songs and see some of her artwork. Carolyn leads ceremonies and ceremonial workshops. She weaves the ancient languages of this land into music that melts my bones, and she takes care of a herd of wild ponies on Dartmoor in a way that shows us how our relationship with the more than human world can be generative and beautiful. So, people of the podcast, please welcome Carolyn Hillyer. Welcome, Carolyn Hillyer, to the Accidental Gods podcast. You were on my very first list when I first drew up a list of people I would most like to have come on. So it's such an honour to have you here. And it sounds as if you're in the midst of a glorious Devon summer down there with the birds really loud outside the window. How has it been in lockdown and now at the end of lockdown for you?
Thank you, Manda. It's wonderful to be here with you. And I know we've been waiting to do this conversation for a few months now, so it's great to be having this chance. Yes, I'm sitting on our farm, which is in the middle of Dartmoor. We have been here locked down really since the beginning of January, because actually the pattern of our year is that we go into hibernation for 3 months once New Year is with us. And we literally slipped from hibernation into lockdown without breaking stride, really. So I haven't really put my foot beyond the gate for quite a long time. It actually changed for us, became more busy because we had 4 young people come to live with us during lockdown. So we went from quite an isolated place into having a small community. And that has been a rich and wonderful experience.
Is it the sort of thing, do you think you'll carry on?
Well, it's interesting because we have been here now for 25 years. And last year, my partner and I spent a lot of time talking about how we could enable greater access for young people to the land here. How could we could make it possible for them to come to do their own work, workshops, retreats, work on the land, whatever it was. And then, of course, in the last few months, we've been experiencing a little of what that actually feels like. And the energy and the dynamic of that has been phenomenal.
Interesting. Yes, so tell us and the listeners a bit about the land that you're on, because I've visited, but pretty much everybody listening probably hasn't and may not have a chance to. So describe your farm, because it's so beautiful.
Well, we came here 25 years ago, and we had been on our way to Dartmoor individually for a very long time before that. So our paths linked up en route, and we did these last steps of the journey together. We found this farm by chance, but we weren't in a position at that point to take it on. So we went away, had a baby, came back, and 9 months later, the farm was still here. And it was at a point in time, a very unusual and strange point in time, when nobody was really wanting to buy farms on Dartmoor. And we were embraced, really, by the people who were living here, who needed to move because they couldn't handle the winters. And they saw us walking up the track with our little family and decided that they would do whatever they could to make it possible for us to come here. So it was quite an extraordinary and magical encounter. So we took the farm on from them, and we have made it our commitment to enable people to come to the land as much as possible. We try to open it up in many different ways. It feels like our guardianship is dependent on our generosity in sharing it.
And because I first met you in person at a very large gathering, and it was the last of, I think, 7 years of gatherings. So you have opened the land up a lot. And at that time, we were working in a roundhouse that you had built. So for people listening, Carolyn's farm is right on the edge of Dartmoor. I imagine the winters are quite impressively bleak and cold, and you probably get stuck there for several weeks, if not months, in normal pre-climate change winters. But then you open it up in the spring, and many people arrive and hold ceremony on your land. Can you tell us a bit about the kinds of ceremony and the ways that you help to connect people to the land that you're on?
Yes. Well, we're actually right in the heart of Dartmoor, in the belly of the moor. It's a place called the High Bowl of the Moor. So whichever direction you come from, you're heading over the high hills and then into this dip in the middle of the moor. That's where we are. And it is actually situated on the edge of a massive ritual landscape that spreads west and north from where our farm is, all across the open wild moor, where obviously nobody lives apart from the ancestor spirits. And we have used this location really to draw in as much as we are able of the wild and ancient energy of the moors around into the farm, to infuse that into the farm so that we create, over time, we have managed to create a wild sanctuary on this place and develop a ritual landscape here which people can come and work with in a very focused way. So we have many different ecosystems within the farm. It's not a huge farm. It's not a great number of acres. It's a small traditional Dartmoor hill farm. It's over 1,000 years old, the farmstead itself. But when we came, the first thing was to plant a lot of trees. So we have planted thousands of trees in this area of land and worked with the different ecosystems to really protect and enhance them. And then within that, we have, as you mentioned, created a ceremonial ancestor house, Neolithic style roundhouse, which is really the heart of all the ritual work that is carried on here. So everybody who comes, in whatever form they come to make ceremony or participate in workshops or events, the roundhouse is within their journey. And then from there, over the more recent years, we have created a stone row, and we have embedded a kistven, granite tomb on the land to hold the dynamic of the Bronze Age ancestor women. We've created a sacred stream area and many shrines, and the shrines change all the time. So at the moment we have a wild horse shrine, we have a shidi, which is a different kind of connecting ancient form of shrine, and that's being held by bear bones, which were put there by our Arctic friends.
The bare bones. So the bare bones are not bare bones from your land, that from the very ancient bears of Britain. These are modern bare bones that have come from another land.
Yes, we had probably about 13 years ago, some friends came from Arctic Sweden, Sami women, and they wanted to place bear bones into the land, which are forest bears from where they are,
Right.
in the tiger forest, and put them into our ancestor shrine. So they created a ceremony there, and we've worked with bear energy ever since in that particular shrine, and obviously anchored into that the ancestral remembrance of bear in our own landscape.
Can you tell me more about how it feels to work with returning the bear energy to the land there? Has it affected your dreaming?
Well, yes, it has. The journey we've taken is to consistently aim to deepen the memory of the land, and be able to bring that in a way that people can access it. So for us, moving back into ancestral memory and gathering that forward into our contemporary experience of life has been very key. The bear has been very significant in terms of the work we've done around the Bronze Age ancestry here, because you probably have heard of White Horse Hill Woman, who is a Bronze Age ancestor discovered on Dartmoor just about 10 years ago. Her remains were recovered. And it was found that she had been wrapped in bear skin. And this was hugely important because it brought into our actual location on the moor here an ancestor who had been held by bear spirit as she moved into her next journey. And that felt very important for the whole dynamic of how we were working.
And did the Sami women know this? Is this why they brought the bear bones with them, or did they dream into the bear and it wanted to come?
That was before the bear. So that they brought the bear bones and put them on our land before we knew about the White Horse Hill Woman.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Wow, because at the time I was with you, you were just building the kist, the Bronze Age burial mound, and that was related to White Horse Hill Woman as well, if I remember right.
That's right, yes. So this was in 2014, and we created a big festival, which you were with us for. And over 3 days and 3 nights, we created ceremony as we symbolically returned White Horse Hill Woman in bone form into the kist. We felt it was important to do it at that point because she had been gathered up and spread around Europe into various scientific laboratories and museum archives, and we felt we needed to gather her into an essence and return her into the land. And we placed her in the form of wild horse bones, actually.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And I remember the ceremonies, and I remember one of those things that has always, people ask, how do you know that this is real? And you know because the land speaks back. And I remember we were in a very large yurt tent, I think, doing ceremony with many, many people from many different backgrounds and cultures. And our small group that had been working together were working with the earth. And we did the bit of ceremony that we had arranged. And it was very much about connecting into the earth. And I felt this quality of the silence behind me. And I turned round and 3 of our group were looking at the ground with that look on their faces of this really can't be happening. And a mole had emerged from the earth right in the center of the little area that we were holding. And it just kind of looked around at all of us and turned around and went back into the earth again. And it was such an affirmation of the groundedness of what we were doing. And the earth was speaking back. And it felt, even now, it feels very moving to remember it. And it gave such power to what we were doing. So what have you done with that burial area since we brought the essence of the ancient woman back to it?
Well, we have been working with it all the time. The following year, actually, we had a very big women's festival here on the land, and we opened up the kist again so that the women could also, and they were women from many different cultures and lands, and that is very important. That we are constantly weaving ourselves into other forms of prayer and other forms of relationship with the earth by connecting and sharing with, our fellow kindred human beings in other cultures and landscapes. But in order to do that, we have to be strong in our own roots. And this is why we have felt over this time, all my work with women has got three main chords within it, which is our relationship to the sacred wild land, our relationship with our ancestry, because unless we can deeply root, we're not solid in the work that we do as we move forward. And then finally, our sense of community in sisterhood, because that's where we draw strength and support from, and then expanding from that, of course, into our wider communities. So this sense of us having a true and authentic, real understanding of our root, that drives all the work that I do here. That's what took me initially to the north, because I felt I needed to do a geographical journey in order to make my chronological journey down into a memory of this landscape. So I needed to be on ice in the way that ice was on our islands.
Right.
And that's why I started going north and then continued to do that ever since.
And can you tell us a little bit about your experiences in the north, things that are okay to share?
Yes, of course. I started by dipping into the Arctic region where the Sami people are in northern Sweden. We have established a relationship with some beautiful community of friends there, and we have gone quite a few times to perform music and also offer workshops at Reindeer Festival there that takes place every winter. Then it felt like there was more journey to make. So sometime a few years after that, we began to step into Russia. And again, it was done with invitation to Indigenous gatherings in order to present music. So by that point, we understood we needed to go carrying strong aspects of our own culture in order to be able to weave into what was happening at the reindeer festivals. So we used the fact that we are Dartmoor pony herders. We have a wild pony herd on the moor, and the culture of that, which is so old in this landscape. And we had obviously been working in a very practical way with our herd for decades. So we went with that culture embedded in ourselves as musicians. So I wore, wild horse leather belts that we'd made from the ponies that had gone, and we took horse drums that were made from these same herds. So we went with our Dartmoor hill pony culture in order to be able to stand there with the reindeer culture. And it was a beautiful way of being able to travel and participate in a nomadic gathering and be part of that journey and place our own ancient indigeny within that.
Brilliant. And is this something, leaving aside coronavirus and not travelling now, is this something that will continue? It sounds like it must.
We had a plan to go back to Siberia next February, but I think we're probably going to delay that or look at it again, because although geographically it's not the furthest I've ever been from home, in terms of how it feels inside, to be travelling in Siberia, especially that far northern edge, it feels like the furthest you could ever be from your own just the length of time it takes to get there, and the complexity of the travel and the permissions and all it takes a long time to organise. So we were just thinking maybe we don't want to be sort of going out so far at the moment. We'll just stay close in and see how the world unfolds.
Yeah, and build the community that you're building on your land. So I would like to look a bit more about the world unfolding, but I would like, before we do that, to go back to the Wild Horse Shrine, and you're working with the horses on your land, because that has always seemed to me it's incredibly grounding and grounded and so full of compassion and heart. And I've just had a foal. So horses are completely, not obviously physically given birth to a foal, but there is a foal on our land. So the ways of interacting with the wild horses on your land. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, well, the horse shrine that we have on our land is created around 4 skulls of wild ponies who've had wild deaths on the moor. And this is one of the extraordinary experiences of being in the middle of Dartmoor, that death is very present as part of the experience of being on the land. So they go up into the remote places over the winter, and some of them don't survive, or maybe some of them don't survive. Some of the mares don't make it through foaling, and they're just doing their experience in the wild place, and nobody's coming and tiding their bodies away. They're there, and it's part of the journey of being on the moor. And when you find these ponies, it is like finding a wild shrine that has been laid there for you to receive from. So, from time to time we bring them back, and we have them then as part of what is happening here. But in terms of our own herd, we started that probably about 23 years ago. We were given an orphaned foal from the top of the moor that would normally have been shot because she had no one to care for her, but they decided they would bring it to us instead and said, start your herd. So we did, and she was our matriarch for many years. We had her with us on the farm for 4 years, and then she needed really to start to interact with the herds up on the open hills. So we took her up there, and she had a difficult first winter, but then began to recover her wild life and started her own family of ponies, sons and daughters. And because we never separated them out, as happens for a lot of the ponies, she built up quite a strong tribe, and therefore became a bit of a big matriarch up there, because she had her sons, and that made all the difference. She had a lot of clout.
But you gelded them, I believe.
That's right.
Do I remember right?
We gelded the boys so they could stay on the moor. The control of stallions is something that's nothing to do with us. Other farmers are involved in that, but we don't get involved in that. So we geld the boys, and we keep as many of the girls as we can, but we have to bring some of them down to the farm so we don't increase our herd size too rapidly.
Right, and I remember you telling me the story of her death. Do you feel able to share that?
I'd love to share that.
Yeah, actually. I cry every time. But
so our whole approach is a very personal one. It is different from the way that most Dartmoor pony herders are using their way of being with their herds. So we've always wanted to keep everything as wild and as true as we can, and have a very intimate relationship with the ponies, but on their terms. And we had been really working in that way with this mare for a very long time, and she'd gone through many foals over the years. We were away doing some concerts one time, and we believe that she got hit by a car while she was just about to foal. So she had stumbled off the road and gone into labour, and our daughter had been out looking for her and found her, and we all went to where she was, and by then she was in a lot of trouble. And we worked with her for 16 hours on the hill there to try and get her up. The foal was dead. We had to pull the foal out. But she was really struggling, and all the time that was happening, her herd of her sons and daughters were gathered around her while we were trying to get her on her feet again. And then we realised that this wasn't going to work, that she was on her way out, really. So we went to get our old tractor and a loader box at the back, and we managed, with the help of neighbours, to roll her into it. She was, still struggling on there, still connecting with the ponies that were around her. And then we started to drive very slowly down the hill towards where our farm is. And the oldest son brought the rest of the herd behind as she was going down, followed her down. I mean, it was nothing to do with us calling them in or anything. They just chose to do that. So as we walked very slowly with her, she was calling out to them, and the oldest son was bringing the rest of the siblings down behind. And then he stopped, wouldn't let them go any further. We carried on down into the valley. And just at that moment, he and another of the gelding sons just let out this huge call to her and rose up. He rose up on his feet and she called out back, and then he took everyone off galloping across the moor. And it was the most extraordinary send-off. They were all entirely aware of what was happening, and she was aware that, this was a completion of something. We just witnessed it and were in awe.
Yeah. And it makes me cry every time I hear that. And it leads me, this is a sidetrack we won't go down much, but because I'm now so much more involved in ponies again here, and seeing the ways that we treat them in standard horse terms, standard human-horse interactions, and then really becoming involved with the ways that we can connect with them and they connect with each other. We routinely break up family groups without even thinking about it. And I think for people to hear that and to understand the extent to which family matters to all of the species around us is huge. So thank you for that. So from that and your wild horse shrine, I would like to begin to look forward to how things could be, because it seems to me you have created the healthiest model that I have ever come across of that triad that you speak of the healthy connection to ancestry that feels to me it doesn't deny the wounding of all that has gone before us at all, but it connects back to a time when, if not unwounded, it feels to me that the ancestral links are healthier, they're whole. There were a time when we were genuinely living in context with the land, and there is so much for us to learn from that sense of being whole. And yet, you're looking forward rather than becoming embedded in the past. You're looking at the community, the sisterhood, the engagement with the land. And so what I'd really like to do is to take us forward a little way to build a vision of how the world could be if we were able to create that sense of connectedness to the land and to each other and to a whole ancestry. Do you have any sense of a vision of how your world could be if you were able to bring together the community that it sounds like you're building?
Well, there's so many threads in there. I think what feels really important at this particular moment in terms of coming out of our recent experiences in the world with our lockdowns is that we have a sense within us of being prepared for what's coming up ahead and gathering our energy, using this time to restore and repair, incubate. I found it hard to have a concept of incubation until just the last few weeks. I felt that it was quite an incubation that is not chosen. It's hard to imagine how you can use that in creative and productive forward ways. And among the conversations I was having, especially with women, there was a sense that we were all floundering and nobody could gather up momentum. Yes. So it didn't feel like a positive incubation. But what I've come to feel in the last few weeks is that the incubation, although it's felt hollowed, has still been a waiting time for all of us. And there are so many things that maybe we will understand much more clearly later on about this period of time. It's very hard, isn't it, when it's so recently in our laps. It's hard to kind of get a perspective on it. But it feels that it's for all of us in our different ways, it will have presented an incredible opportunity for us to reassess and recalibrate and be ready, because we've got so much work to do. So it's like the pause before we're leaping and surging into whatever is required of us, and understanding that we have to meet the challenge. We don't have an option not to meet the challenge.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you say it's felt strange because in a lot of my conversations, we have an elder group together, which is mostly women, but some men, and the men have felt much more gung ho in a way, and pretty much universally, the women have felt scattered, and there's that sense of a wild winter where the winds are all blowing and the seeds are not lying and not setting yet, and the land is churning. And we felt exhausted. It's felt very, very tiring. And it's only again in the last, since the new moon actually, that I've begun to feel as if the dust is settling and we're beginning to set a root of some sort.
Yes, and it is trusting that process, that within this scattered, empty, hollowed time, there is something that without us even being aware of it, something that's being created, and which we can gradually step into the flow of that and see where it takes us. I think what I was referring to earlier when we were talking about the young people coming here to the land, I do feel that that's hugely significant. As I've started into my 7th decade, I'm beginning to appreciate that this period of life is about, having worked so hard to gather and bring together and to understand and increase perspective and all of these things that you do when you're on your path, that this is a period of giving really, as much as possible. And it's dependent on the generosity of the older generations in giving power and space and resource into the hands and the visions and the dynamic of younger generations. And the world has yet again turned away from a different possibility, and yet again it's in the control of aging men who draw power from inequality and strength from the struggle of others. And so it's up to us to enable, to bear witness, and us who've been working this journey for a long time and moving into a different part of our lives, that we are bearing witness and holding energy for this younger collective voice to represent humanity, and we mustn't hold on to things ourselves, because it's dependent on us to keep allowing the flow, keep allowing it to move through our fingers, really.
Yes, that giving of power and space and resource. And being an elder circle for the younger generation seems to me, okay, now I sound like my grandmother, but there's an awakening, and yes, the old reactionary men hold the reins of the power that was, but it seems to me they don't hold any of the reins of the power that is coming. And increasingly that the governance is a hollow shell within which other things are growing, it feels to me, and that if we can nurture the shoots of a generation that seems to have liberated itself or been liberated from a lot of the strictures that we grew up with, and has vision and a sense of connectivity that being the internet generation gives, I suppose, that if we can then help them to connect to the land, which is what you're doing, then that becomes almost unstoppable, I would like to think. And so you've had 4 young people at home, but I'm guessing they're connected to a much, much wider network, and that those 4 young people at home are deeply connected to your land. So have you a sense now of building a community either localized on your land or across the world that is having a sense of a vision of what they can do with the power and space and resource?
Well, I think all of that's still in the place of the dreaming and the place of anchoring. I feel that right now, exactly at this moment in time, it's quite hard to be definite about any kind of concept of the future or plans for the future. I think what I've been feeling for myself, that the most important thing is fluidity and being attentive, watchful, and then seeing what unfolds. So it feels like the potential for change for us here on this land is there, as well as for the way it is for in the much wider global context for all of us. But we don't quite know what that means yet. And I think all we can do is watch and listen and be attentive and keep being flexible. Really remember to be nifty on our feet so that we can turn on a penny and go into a different direction if that's what's being called to us. And it's odd, isn't it, that we talk about ancestry and ancient ways of being on the land, and yet we're talking about this new, younger concept of how humanity is being represented. But it feels that there's this massive work of gathering the fragments and mending all the ripped pieces of human experience, and to sew a new cloth together, which keeps, which brings out all our treasured and ancient and forgotten truths. It does depend on this deep sense of our own root into something that is strong and timeless, and with that within us we can do anything. I think it's when we get cut off from that, we're not able to link ourselves into the rich tapestry of wisdom and understanding and connectedness that we can draw from the land and from this sense of our ancient connection with it. And that's what we can ride on.
And in your exploration of that, when I met you, you were exploring, I think I remember with Oxford University, the very ancient Proto-Gaelic language that would have been in the lands of Britain before the Romans came, quite a long way before the Romans came. And we sang songs, I remember, in that language that melted the marrow of my bones in ways nothing has ever done. It felt magical in its truest sense. And I wonder, have you continued that exploration? And could you speak some of that language for us?
I'd love to. I started, actually, what it is, I started working with this language about 4 years ago. I uncovered it through the internet. It's the University of Wales holds a lexicon of it's Proto-Celtic, it's called, or Common Celtic, and it's a mother tongue that fed into the living Celtic languages that are still spoken today. So this roots into the Bronze Age, 4,000 years ago. And what I love about this language, which has been linguistically, archaeologically reconstructed by stepping backwards from all the living Celtic languages with all the words that are the same. So they're obviously the older root words, and then reconstructing this more ancient tongue. And people have been working on it for a long time, over 100 years or more. So there is a lexicon being held by the University of Wales. That's where I originally found it. Possibly there are others elsewhere. And I love it because it came from Central Europe and all through North and Western Europe, and then eventually onto these islands. So it's a very connecting language. And it's a language that can belong to all of us who feel that we want a language root into this landscape, into these ancient British islands. We want something to be able to represent the voice of people in whose footsteps we tread. And the first time I taught it was for a gathering that was to welcome Indigenous women from other parts of the world into a big time of ceremony here in Devon. There were about 300 women there. And I taught this language as a song for the first time, and it was so liberating, I felt, to witness the women being able to have ancient words they could speak, which had no history or contemporary subtleties attached to those words. It was purely from the earth and words that express the earth. And so we've continued to work with it a great deal in that way, because it's a bone language. It's a language that can be felt deep within the bones and links you straight into the ancient resonance of the landscape. And that's why I love it. So this is what it sounds like. And I should say, when I work with it, just in case there's any linguists listening, I create songs from it like beads on a necklace. So I'm not bothering about plurals or tense or any kind of interconnecting words particularly. I'm creating a necklace of words and that becomes the meaning of the song. And the pronunciation, I've done what fits my mouth.
Right.
So, I feel there's a great liberation in a Bronze Age language. It can be what works for your own bones. So this is how it is. I'm going to sing it, actually, this bit, Manda. I'm going to sing this bit.
Thank you. Yes.
Kamano ni sweatito ni sandewek snate jabreto sago and snijo Kamano sago and snijo Kamano sago and snijo Kamano kwako itsu Kamano kwako itsu. And that means we remember all that we have spun, all that we have woven, path of needle to the cloth, the blanket and the braid. We remember the blanket and the braid. We remember all our wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you. When we do the transcript of this, if you would be able to send me those words, do you have them written down?
Yeah, I can just send you the song. Yeah,
yes,
that's not
that
a problem.
Would be fantastic.
Okay.
That's and again, and it genuinely goes in at the level of bones. It's an astonishing feeling. I'm sure everyone listening to it felt it, that it sinks in to the ground of our being in a way that I have never experienced with any language at any time. Which is so beautiful that you're bringing it back.
On that occasion I was mentioning, the first time I taught the women, as I was moving around this circle of the several hundreds women, teaching this song ready for them to receive the visiting women, I was teaching them a different song, actually, Noibo Nani, Sacred Grandmothers, Askono Kajo, Our Sacred Bones. And as I was walking around teaching the song, so many women were crying because it felt that it did reach in to something they had forgotten about, and that they were then able to remember by expressing it through the language.
Right. And I'm thinking, because dreaming is one of our routes to connecting to who we really are, have you found that while working with this language, have you begun to dream in this language, I guess is where I'm going?
No, I don't dream in this language. No, I don't. That's not how it comes to me. We haven't touched on this, but I paint my journey. I've always done that, and that's been. So I've painted the cycles of the workshop journeys. I've painted my way into the books and all the teaching. This has just been my personal way of finding my path and then carrying it along into these other things. So the language connects to the paintings, and that has been a relationship I've noticed increasingly, that when I'm connecting to the women that I'm painting, they are coming with this language, and that's been very wonderful experience to see that happening.
Yes, and we will put links in the show notes to your website where there are some of the depictions of they're amazing. Again, your paintings, your art is something that sinks deep into something that feels very real and authentic and grounded, and that breaks apart the strictures of our current reality, it seems to me. So I could see how the language and that really links, and possibly we might be able to use some of that, your artwork, in the on the podcast. We'll have a look at that. So I'm aware that time is moving on and that you have another Zoom call coming up, as we all seem to. I don't know about you, but as soon as lockdown happened, my life became a series of Zoom calls every day that all seemed incredibly important. I have managed to cut some of them down more recently. So threading through all of your work that you do on the land and that you've spoken of here is work specifically with women and for women, and women of all ages. And you go to work with the women in the Sami lands and, from the sound of things, in Siberia as well. So can you tell us more about how that is for you, how you got to it, and where you think it might go?
So I have been working with women's work for over 4 decades, starting off as a young woman with activism, with feminism, women's politics, moving from that into a more spiritual approach in the landscape. So something quite, revelatory happened when I suddenly was aware of the strong sense of sacred womanhood in the land, and that began a completely new direction of relationship with women's power and women's potential and women's prayer, and that's unfolded over the years. It started becoming more focused when I began to paint, which was when I was around about 28 years old. And I was then able to focus all of that feeling of this spirit within woman and within our womanhood into the work I was producing as the paintings. And it was chaotic to start with. I was just, using household paint, daubing onto bits of chipboard, whatever I could do just to get the feeling of it out. But I began to catch up with myself and to focus it more. And then thus the journey began. And I used to sing to my paintings. So as the years unfolded, once I started working with my partner, which was when I was about 30, 32, something like this, I started to record the songs that came. So then it became a way of catching another aspect of women's spirituality into the music. And around that time, I started teaching women's workshops. And that's been a slow unfolding process. But that really started the first year we came here to the land. So right from the beginning, being on the land was a way of me being able to share something with women and to see what women were wanting from that experience. So gradually the workshop program could evolve.
And where is the evolution taking it?
Well, for many years it was based around the cycles of the paintings. So wherever those paintings were taking me,
right,
that's where I took the workshops. But for the last 5 years or so, I've been consciously creating a program. It's felt important to bring in all the threads and all the different aspects of how we've worked here into something into a vessel that women can find a place within that feels right for them. And for a long time, it was my aim was to go slowly. So I tried to avoid creating hierarchy. I really didn't want hierarchy to be part of this process. And I feel that we're kind of getting there. It's working. We have it's called the Braided River Program, and it's the imagery of water is really significant within it. So we have long returning women who are the salmon sisters who return every season, to keep on adding to their work. And then we have women being brought in through the hearth circles. So the roundhouse holds the sanctuary place for them when they first put their feet into this kind of work. So gradually we've created and consolidated, in a sense, a fluid community. And I like the sense of it being fluid. I don't want it ever to feel like there's an organisation or a system or a club or anything like that. It needs to keep having this river flowing through it. So that's how we've been working with it.
Beautiful. And when was the Bronze Age woman found? That was quite a long way into your tenure on the land.
Yes, she was first discovered that her kistven on the top of the mole was being damaged. That was probably around about 2012, something like this. I might be slightly off with my dates, but they had been keeping an eye on her kist, and they knew that there were some issues that they maybe would need to go and investigate to see if there was anything in there before the whole thing fell apart. And that's when they realised there was a...
So hang on, they knew the kist was there, but they didn't know who was in it?
Well, the policy has been on Dartmoor not to disturb or uncover any of the kists. That if there's a kist, it's left undisturbed. This one was getting damaged by erosion and animal, animals rubbing up against it and all that kind of thing. So they thought that if there was something in it, they would do some rescue archaeology. And that's when they found her bone bundle.
Wow. Wrapped in bearskin.
Yes, wrapped in bearskin, yeah.
And what do we know about her?
We know that she was about 28 years old. We know that she was very well loved. Of course, in the way that people like to attach hierarchy, she's had all sorts of names attached to her, such as the Tin Princess and all of this stuff. But I prefer to say that the way that she was honoured shows that she was loved, and she had beautiful items carefully handmade that were within her burial bone bundle. And it was a very exquisite find and quite groundbreaking in terms of archaeological science. Things were found there that they didn't really have very good examples of before. So they know that she was part of a community for which tin was their wealth. So tin was being brought from the ground here on Dartmoor, and it was being traded into the Mediterranean, and that tin was being used as part of what created bronze, fueled the Bronze Age. So the tin was really important.
And how long ago was she buried?
4,000 years ago.
4,000 years. Okay. Wow. And the bearskin, was it every one of her bones, or had they put her out in a kind of a sky burial and then collected the bones afterwards?
No, she'd been cremated, actually. So what was left in the bundle were her burnt bones.
Okay.
But she had been cremated without her robe or her jewellery. So then the robe and the jewellery and all her possessions were placed in with her burnt bones. So they were intact when they had gone into the bundle, but her bones were in pieces, burnt in there, and then everything wrapped around.
And those bones themselves, you said, are in academic...
They're in the museum. Yes, in a museum back room somewhere.
Gosh, but her energy is back in the kist that we worked with back in 2014.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah. And then, and you have bear energy on the land as well. I'm still completely in awe of that. So thank you. If we can envisage how the world would feel, not necessarily what it would look like, and definitely not how we get there, if we were to be able to step into a totally generative community where the needs of people and all life and all of the web of life were met, then it's something we could begin to move towards, because we have very many felt sense images and narratives of how things could go badly wrong. We have none of what happens if it goes really wonderfully right. Could we create a sense together of that, do you suppose?
Yes, let's talk about that.
Give it a go.
Yeah. Okay.
Just as an introduction, I've been doing this meditation since the start of lockdown. At the start of lockdown, I went up the hill, I said, "What do you need of me?" And they said, "We need you to do this. What if we got it right?" Without defining what right is, without defining how you got there. And I think I spent the first 2 lunar cycles of doing this every day and hitting up against my own internal energetic and emotional boundaries. My head was quite happy that this was a concept, and I had no idea the extent to which internally I had internalized hopelessness and despair and everything is going to go very badly wrong. And allowing that to soften under the gaze of just gentle inquiry. Yes, okay, I hear all of that, but what if we didn't go down those roads? What if we were able to create a really genuinely generative community? Because everybody actually wants that sense of purpose and connection and commitment and contribution. And if we were able to harness that desire with the connectivity to the web of life, such that we had what you described, that sense of being able to turn in the moment as an impulse comes in of we, the web, we need you to do this now. And we go, okay, we can do this. How does that feel? And what I got to was a sense of extraordinary liberation in the beginning. I didn't know how afraid I had been until I let that fear drop. And then connectivity arose. And more recently, a sense that I find quite hard to give words to of being in connected service, of being fully open and free, and of everything flowing through me, such that I am the circuit board in the network where some things come in and flow out, and I don't have to push them or pull them. I just am there. And it feels, I can't describe the sense of liberation and of connection, of that sense of that one gets when we're with a group, a tribe, and the tribe is all functioning, where everybody knows what their role is because it's what they can do. And you can trust everybody else to be what they need to be, such that I can be what I need to be, and everything flows. And it hasn't happened often in my life, but when it happens, it's the best possible feeling. And so more recently, I have occasionally, not for long, dropped into that place. So for me, that's the vision, is that sense of a global tribe of trust and connectivity, and a sense of purpose that transcends anything that my head mind could generate. So I offer that as a starting point. Over to you.
That's beautiful, Manda. That's a really beautiful flow of words. I loved listening to what you were just saying. Okay, so, well, the first thing I would say is that all these decades I've been working with my focus being on women's experience in the world. And that would be, for me, the first thing, a sense of such a balance in women's experience within the world experience, that we no longer need to spend decades and decades working on women's position in the world and bringing it into a place of equality and safety and equal relationship. But we do need to do that at the moment. So it's a work of great importance. But that would be my first sense that we had such a balance that we're no longer needing that within our world experience. The other thing in terms of talking on the way to getting to that place, I think we need to learn fierce tenderness in our guardianship of the world. I think we're all understanding that increasingly with the things that have been happening in recent years around climate disintegration. We've all come to realize that our tenderness needs to be fierce, that as we guard our boundaries, as we guard this precious heart of our vision of how we want our mended world to be, that we can't be complacent or passive in that, but we need to retain the tenderness in that. So fierce tenderness feels a significant part of our journey to that place. In terms of the vision itself, I love the things you were saying. I love that sense that we can occasionally have a feel of what that is. And I think we probably do all step into those moments where it feels that everything is linked up and there's a pattern that feels right. And obviously within that is our relationship with the land and with the world, with nature. All of that has to be key to our ongoing survival and relationship with each other as well. So that can only be, for me, I cannot imagine being able to stretch out my arms to hold more than the bit that is here. And when I've come to think about, okay, so step into these actions and move to support that and bear witness to these things in the street going on there, whatever these things are. But ultimately, it always comes down to, this is the job. This is to get this bit of the earth, just this little tiny bit, get it right, get it shared, get it working right, make it a sanctuary. And that will join up with all the other things that other people are doing. And that's how we do it. It can be done only in these, I feel, in these small ways. And then suddenly maybe we'll look around and go, oh, all the small things have joined up and now it's massive. But the massive vision is very hard for our human minds and hearts to be able to hold sometimes. Well, for myself, I find that. So it's reaching out to the massive vision and then bringing it into a smaller focus and getting that bit good.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
If everybody did that, if everybody worked in their actual geographic spaces that they are to connect to the land where you are living, where we are living, and to create that sense of sacredness and the fierce tenderness that you spoke of. That feels really beautiful. And then we're to reach out to everyone else doing that, then there would be a hole.
But the sharing is important. I mean, I just this might be going up a little alley you want to edit out, but I feel I've witnessed up on Dartmoor here during lockdown a sense of guardianship of the land from people around who live here, but it's not been very tender in terms of other people's desperate need to come out and be in nature. And I do feel that the privilege of having the care of land, we have to remember it's a privilege and it's not ours by right, and we must share it. It's only being given to us to look after because we understand it must be shared, and we have to keep doing that. If we start holding on to it or creating more boundaries and divisions, it's not a good position. And I'm quite ashamed of witnessing some of the things that have been happening in wild places where other people have come at last to be able to take some refuge and have not been so easily welcomed. I think that this is key. We have to share.
Right, yes. And this is about finding everybody's needs rather than wants, and being able to work out ways where they can be met in a way that is healing. Because it's also the case, I saw some pictures of, I think, Bournemouth yesterday, where they had to draft in extra police just to clear the gridlock because everybody had descended on Bournemouth Beach. And I know our local little wild bit, Carding Mill Valley, a couple of weekends ago, 1,000 cars were in a place that has space for 50. And they came, and it took the local people, it must have been 3 weeks ago, because it's taken 3 weeks to clear up the rubbish that was left. And people do end up feeling protective because there is a need to connect with the land, but then the respect of the land isn't met.
And I guess that's
and
where
we
the
need
fierce,
to find that balance also.
Yeah, and that's where the fierce tenderness comes in, in holding the sanctuary space. You know, these are the boundaries of the sanctuary.
Yeah.
You're welcome, but we're going to fiercely make sure it's looked after.
Honour the land. It's not just there for you to crap all over and then leave your picnic tables because you could not be bothered to carry them the 10 yards back to the car. So it's an interesting one, of that sense of being able to hold compassion for all sides of everything and to honour the needs of the land as much as the people who need to be there. And people who don't understand that the land can be honoured or how to do it. There's a lot of education needed. And I don't quite know how that happens other than modelling it in a way that is felt and doesn't come across as hectoring or evangelizing or just telling people what to do, which doesn't work. So that's probably a whole other podcast. So yes.
Well,
so I thought we'd come to the end, but that was the whole interesting bit.
I do have another song that
yes,
actually
I know. I was about to say
about this. Really, it's about our relationship with the land, and I suppose for me it might be a more succinct summing up of why I do what I do. If that would be useful to you,
that would be so beautiful.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Amanda, so much for inviting me and for being part of this. I've really appreciated being on your podcast. Thank you.
It's an honour. Thank you.
We are thorn when we crouch upon the hill, so bleak, so still, so cold. Our roots run down in the ragged rocks, so deep, so hard, so old. We croon beneath the half-moon as she waxes through to full. We are born from the hollow, smooth and dark that formed this ancient hill. We are willow when we sit beside the stream, so far, so chill, so keen. We spread our limbs on the mossy bank, so soft, so quiet, so green. We sing beneath the pale sun as she rises through the dawn. We are born from the waters wild and free that carved this ancient moor. We are oak when we stand within the night, so black, so full, so wide. Our arms stretch high in the sparkling air, so sweet, so far, so bright. We dance beneath the stars that slowly turn the world around. We are born from the storms and the rolling winds that shape this ancient land. We are fire when we sit beside this hearth, so fierce, so kind, so raw. We drum our path through the heron's marsh, so strong, so clear, so sure. We sing around these embers as they warm our sacred home. We are born from the soul of our mother's songs that fill our ancient bones. We are born from the soul of our people's songs that fill our ancient bones.
So that's it for another week. Enormous thanks to Carolyn for her wisdom and connectedness and the fierce tenderness of her care of the land, and for the truly bone-melting beauty of her songs. For those of you who want to hear more of them or to find out about the courses she runs, there's a link to her website in the show notes, which are on the podcast page of our website at accidentalgods.life. There will be a transcript of the interview there as well, together with transcripts of all of the other podcasts. And we will be back next week with another conversation looking into how the future could be different if we choose to connect with the land, with each other, with our sense of the sacred. In the meantime, thanks as ever to Caro C for the music at the head and foot of the podcast and for the sound production. Thanks to Faith Tilleray for being the other half of the creative team that is Accidental Gods, and for designing the website. If you want to see the beauty and the wonder of what she's created, that address again is accidentalgods.life, and you'll find the show notes, the other podcasts, the visualizations and meditations that we put in the pandemic resources section, that will sometime soon be just the resources section, I think. And there's the Accidental Gods membership program, the portal which is a structured training to give everyone the opportunity and the means to connect with the web of life with integrity and authenticity and genuine groundedness. So if you know of anybody who would like to be part of the fierce tenderness and the care of the land that will take us forward, then do send them the link. In the meantime, that is it for now. See you next week. Thank you, and goodbye.